Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving right into part 2 of a 4-part sermon series titled Financial Freedom. This was originally preached by Pastor Noel Sundesh over at the Crown of Life Ministries in Bhopal. So whether you've got a deep theology background or you're just curious about how different frameworks approach wealth, we're going to unpack the core mechanics of biblical earning exactly as they're laid out in this source. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today's breakdown. We're going to quickly look at the series context, the mindset of stewardship, the 4 aspects of finance, the actual action of earning, the ethics involved, and finally, purpose and reliance. All right, starting with Section 1, we're setting up the series context and looking at the foundational principles of this financial freedom. Now, the core premise here comes straight out of Psalm 35, verse 27, and it makes a really interesting point. It says that God actually takes pleasure in the prosperity of his servants. Honestly, this kind of flips the common assumption that faith automatically requires poverty right on its head. But there is a catch. The sermon focuses on a massive prerequisite. You absolutely must become a good servant first. The source presents this as the literal key to unlocking true financial independence.
Moving on to Section 2, let's talk about the mindset of stewardship, which is essentially a giant paradigm shift.
Pastor Sandesh gives us a very clear definition of what a good steward is. Basically, it's a believer who fully acknowledges that absolutely everything belongs to God. Their job? Well, it's just to manage it according to His will. The explainer really emphasizes that financial freedom only happens when you make this mental shift. You've got to stop acting like the owner of your wealth and start acting like a caretaker or a manager.
So there's this stark contrast drawn between God's absolute ownership and our temporary role as managers. And the sermon gives a pretty firm warning here. If you walk around acting like you are the absolute owner of everything you have, you are always going to feel like you're lacking something. It seriously doesn't matter if you're earning in the lakhs. Without this stewardship mindset, you'll never feel like it's enough, or worse, you'll eventually lose what you have. Accepting this is what kicks off true financial freedom.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 4 aspects of finance from a biblical perspective.
So the biblical perspective on money is categorized into 4 distinct buckets. We've got earning, offering, spending, and saving. Now, to get that comprehensive financial freedom, you'd need to master all 4. But for today's explainer, we're zooming in entirely on that very first pillar, earning. Why? Because as the source text bluntly points out, without earning, there simply is no financial freedom to begin with.
And that leads to a pretty big question, right? What do we actually need to do to earn? Well, in this sermon, the answer isn't just a simple go get a job. It actually introduces a highly specific 5-part biblical framework.
Here are those 5 criteria: work, diligence, integrity, eternal purpose, and God's reliance. To really experience the kind of financial freedom described in the source, you have to hit all 5 of these marks. So let's unpack them one by one.
Kicking off Section 4, let's look at the actual action of earning through work and diligence.
Criterion number 1 is literally just to work. There's this powerful quote from 2 Thessalonians, "If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." And Pastor Sandesh makes a really fascinating point here. He notes that God himself worked for 5 days during creation before taking a rest on the 7th. Humans were even created on the 6th day with the specific job of working and protecting the Garden of Eden. So the takeaway? If you're actively avoiding work, you're not just being lazy, you're actually breaking a fundamental biblical principle and failing to reflect a working God. Basically, no honest work is considered too small. You just have to do it.
Okay, criterion 2 is diligence. And there's a bold claim made here. Diligence acts as a literal magnet for provision. Think about it. If you're working, maybe you even have a decent job, but you're still facing poverty or coming up short, the source suggests you really need to evaluate your diligence. Are you just clocking in and showing up, or are you actually working earnestly? The argument here is that God rewards that earnest, dedicated effort.
Section 5 brings us to the ethics of earning, specifically working with integrity. So let's look at the practical application of our 3rd criterion, integrity. The sermon uses a great comparison. Picture a mechanic who does a 500 rupee job but lies to overcharge the customer 2,000 rupees. Now contrast that with a truthful property dealer who just keeps an honest, transparent margin. The sermon gives a strict warning. Going after quick money through shady business practices is a fast track to collapsing that business. You literally cannot experience biblical financial freedom if your foundation is built on deceit.
Pastor Sandesh anchors this ethical stance right in Scripture, specifically Proverbs 11:1. It says that a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. He makes it completely, unequivocally clear, earning must never ever compromise honesty. If you want God's blessing on your finances, you've got to operate with absolute integrity, and not just when it's easy, but all the time.
All right, our final section, Section 6, Purpose and Divine Reliance. This is about looking way beyond yourself. Our fourth criterion is to earn with an eternal purpose. What does that mean? It means earning specifically to support your family, help your relatives, and assist anyone in need. The source text does not mince words here. Earning only for yourself is not going to bring you true financial freedom. True believers are supposed to work hard to create a surplus with the explicit intention of sharing it. According to the sermon, the people who give to those in need are the ones who are actually, truly financially free.
And that brings us to the fifth and final criterion, which is God's reliance. There's this metaphor of a farmer that just perfectly balances our human responsibility with the need for the divine. A farmer can put every ounce of effort into plowing the field and sowing the seeds, right? That covers work and diligence. But at the end of the day, he relies entirely on God for the rain. It doesn't matter how hard he works, he cannot make it rain himself. And that is exactly what the sermon means by earning with God's reliance.
This idea is powerfully backed up by Psalm 127 verse 1, which says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain." There's a massive pitfall highlighted here. The absolute second you start relying solely on your own earnings and your own strength, you're effectively turning money into an idol. Relying on your paycheck instead of the ultimate provider makes all your hard work completely in vain, according to the source. So the ultimate warning here is simple but tough. Stay humble. The source text acknowledges a very difficult truth. Finding money combined with humbleness in this world is incredibly rare. You can never allow the pride of your earning capacity to go to your head. Cultivating wealth alongside humility might be rare, but the sermon argues it's absolutely necessary for a lifetime of real financial freedom.
So, we've walked through the mindset of stewardship and those 5 practical criteria for earning. I want to leave you with this provocative thought straight from Pastor Sandesh's explainer. As you look at your own family's earnings, which of those 5 biblical criteria are you missing? It might just be time to sit down, have a really honest conversation, and align your work, your diligence, your integrity, your purpose, and your reliance. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.